Sirs, madams, and everything in between, I hope you're having a lovely evening. I'm here to go over and teach a little bit of vocals towards you lovely fellas, girls, and everything else. Well, as I said before, sorry for a little bit more of a rapid switching, but I wanted to go over and give just a little bit of a justification for why I know the fuck to do in going over and teaching you lovely folk. I am going to be saying this to, a little bit less extreme because I am going to be doing a lot of vocal shit here. And I will also preface this by more saying that, one, I'm going to be using my own terms because I am self-taught. It just learned a lot of stuff due to one of my conditions, making it so a lot of shit that I have to do with my voice is manual. And two, well, I'm going to be starting this video from beginner stuff to more complex things. So in case that you are somebody who doesn't feel that confident about a lot of the vocal stuff, well, don't worry. We're going to be starting with something pretty easy and more of a way that a lot of videos I've watched go over about stuff, because there's also some things that they miss in certain ways that kind of annoys me, which is why I'm making this video, because, I like vocal stuff a lot, and I want to go over and teach some other people. Plus, there's a few friends, which I always go over and try and help with some vocal stuff, so directly pointing towards the video probably would be very, very nice. So, as a starter, I will also say one more thing. I am somebody who's comfortable going over and using very masculine voices, and very feminine one as well. As such, most of the things I'm going to be teaching are going to be both done in a masculine voice and a feminine voice, to go over and make it a little bit more easier for, both people that want, both the dynamic type of voices to be able to learn from. I'm also going to be teaching some different lessons from it, which is, probably this video is going to be very, very, very long. I'm expecting it to be at least an hour long or longer. So, hopefully you're here for the ride. For a starter, though, I want to go on something that's pretty easy for people to mess up. And that is basic ways that guys and girls talk. Now, I'm going to point towards this, not just for the trans fellas and stuff, but by also going over and pointing out towards this, we can talk about some very basic vocal stuff, which is going to be linked in with a lot of the things we're going to be talking about later. So, as a starter, when guys talk, guys normally talk in a type of way like this, when we're talking about different type of things. Now, some of you may be able to already catch on about certain type of differences between how I'm talking right now and how I was talking before. Because most of the time when I'm doing a guy voice, I talk in more the feminine type of way, to have a better distinction between these type of things. When I'm talking in femme, I'm talking more like this. And due to that, you already may start noticing a few little dialectical differences in between how I'm talking now compared to just a little bit before. Now, to explicitly spell it out for you, though, when I'm talking as a guy, I don't only just shift my voice a little bit. When I more do, that to make it a little bit more obvious which one I'm doing, for, more vocal beginners and stuff. But, I'm not really taking pauses, am I? I'm continuing to talk even when I don't really need to. I'm not having little pauses, little other stuff. I'm keeping my voice mostly consistent in one certain way. I'm not changing, the way I'm speaking certain words. It's still staying, mostly inside, the same type of vibe the entire way through. And also that I'm not changing my pace. I'm talking the exact same way for every single word, if you don't notice as much. To further highlight the differences here, when I'm talking as a girl, I most of the time will drag on the ends of my words slightly. This is more of a way that females feels a bit weird to go over about that because of the insinuation of other people, but females generally are socialized to go over and talk in a way that they're holding onto their words slightly longer. They're, more dynamic and changing the way that they're talking. If you may notice, I'm not keeping my voice consistent completely. I'm having a small little dialectic change when I'm, talking. Which, to further go over about that, I'm basically emoting more with my voice. I'm doing little pauses, doing little moments, and my voice is shifting from going over up and down slightly in how I'm expressing things towards you. I'm being a little bit more dynamic to visualize this type of difference more. When I'm doing a female voice, it's more like the body is swaying slightly. It's still staying generally in the same place, but there's small little differences you can still more notice. Meanwhile, when I'm talking as a guy, in the same type of voice, My voice is still being steady. I'm not swaying, I'm staying strong, straightforward in how I'm talking. And yeah, there can be a little bit of dialectical change, I guess, showing some emotions or something. But they're less emphasized, they're less there, and everything's a little bit more shortened, a little bit faster in how we're getting to someplace. Because we're not holding on to notes. There isn't that much of a difference between how fast I'm talking now compared to before. You can play back the video in case you want to double check things. But me dragging on my words slightly does make it sound like I'm considering what I'm saying more. There's these small little differences in how we seem to be talking. You know, I'm not gonna go too much further around this. Like, this is just like bare basics to go over on like the other stuff. If somebody like specifically wants to go into trans stuff, this is like a good starter to go over about it. But the reason I'm specifically going about this one thing, well, in fact, I promised a friend that I'd dedicate a section towards this thing, is that just by looking at it like this, it's like, oh yeah, the voice work is like a little bit more dynamic, isn't it? Also, to go and show a direct comparison, this is like slightly higher level, but when I'm talking as a guy, more like this is me more masculine. This is when I'm more masculinely presenting. In the exact same voice, though, when I start talking femme, it's more like this. Again, one-to-one translation about me being more masculine and how I'm talking towards other people, compared to me being more feminine. I'm having slightly more pauses, as I said earlier, and I'm considering my words lightly more. It's still masculine, but it's a little bit more androgynous, at least when you're more talking about normal voices, due to the fact that I'm doing the female type of dialect, the female way of more talking, and having little pauses and stuff like that. Again, it's dumb that these are coded in that type of way. Like that me being masculine has to go over and be like precise, cool, confident, and super straightforward, and not considering at all what I say, which, maybe that's a reason why, guys say dumb shit a little bit more, But that is like more the stereotypes, and it's one of the ways to kind of more code switch between going more masculine and feminine. Again, most of the time I don't care about that type of stuff, but I did promise a friend I would go over and make certain things like this. Also, to be clear, there's more of a spectrum here. I can still present generally pretty masculine with a voice that's more, going like this, because, hey, guess what? Voices kind of implied a lot of other features, something that we are going to get to a little bit more on this type of audio. Little hint, we're going to be treating this type of lessons like a pyramid, where I'm going on the lower levels and we're going higher and higher and higher. I'll later explain that type of thing more and my own type of philosophy about it in a later date of this audio. But feminine voices are generally more considerate, holding on to where the ends, and, well, those little type of differences. Again, it sounds super stupid when you have to talk about it explicitly, but I hope you can hear it. Now, that we put away the small little request from a lovely little friend, we'll talk about, like, the basic stuff. Again, we are starting from the bottom of the pyramid, so I can go over and just add the same fundamental knowledge as when I'm talking to, well, you about, because we're going to go into a lot of these fundamentals quite a bit. But first off, one of the things that when you're practicing for a new voice is that you are going to want two things. One of the annoying things is that you're generally taught to only do one of these, which is stupid. The bare basics has 3 different options that you have to go over and learn. The first 2 are things you've kind of heard a little bit. One is a tuner. So, for instance, if I want to tune this voice to sound more high pitch, and I was starting to do that for the first time, I would find a word which is more my tuner word. What I mean by that is it's a word that you more use to go up or down in the general type of way that you actually want to use your vocal cords. To give an example, hi, 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 hi. That's as far as I feel comfortable going with my tuner. Again, I still have to talk quite a bit for this audio, but you get a little bit from that, right? That the voice is just repeating the same word. It doesn't have to be high specifically. It's just a word that you feel more comfortable using as your tuner to either go up or down, or specifically hit a certain note. Again, the reason why I use tuner is because it's a lot more all-encompassing. Because again, you could be just using it to hit a certain voice that you want to do over and do, and that may require a different tuner. But one thing that you do want to go over and do is that a lot of people suggest using a tuner. Again, they use different words for these type of things, but they don't quite give the second part, where if you're just using a tuner, you're not necessarily going to be able to keep that voice. A tuner by itself is still decent, but you're not going to be able to really speak in that voice. You'll hit the note, but again, in case we're using tuner as the example, you need something to stabilize yourself with, right? After all, hitting one note once is good for practice to know where you're kind of wanting to go, but you're going to need more than that. As such, here's me using my tuner along with a stabilizer. For me, stabilizer is a longer word such as hello. It doesn't need necessarily be the same again for you. You can have different tuners or different stabilizers. Hi and hello are just the things that I myself personally use. So, to give an example. Hi, hi, hello, 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 hi, hello. How are you doing today? I'm doing lovely. How are you doing at the current moment? I hope that you are doing exceptionally well. One thing you may notice about when you're using a tuner and a stabilizer is that the stabilizer is always going to be slightly lower than what you're doing with the tuner. For instance, whenever I say, hi, it's always higher than what I'm doing right now. You can again roll back on the video to re-listen towards this. Again, I could go more extreme than this, but I need to keep talking for like around an hour. But with my stabilizer, I'm able to go down to a level that my normal voice can. It's again one reason why a stabilizer is really required. Because by having a longer word, which you are using as your stabilizer, you can actually keep talking in a voice like this, which may be even difficult for, some more professionals to more reach. It also more forces you to talk in a way that, like, you're saying a word. Again, that sounds really dumb if you haven't done certain type of vocal training before, but most of the time you're going to be just saying sounds. You're not saying a word in the way that a normal person would be saying it, not in a way that's easily understandable, which, again, in case you're aiming for that with your tuner, is really cool, but at least for as a starter, which is what we're doing right now, you need to reach something that you are able to actually speak with. Now, when you're going to be speaking with a stabilizer, it's still going to be taking a lot more out of you. Me talking in this voice is not one I normally use. Even with my experience, I cannot keep talking like this for like 2 hours or something. But, well, it's something I can still latch onto. It's still something I can go over and do, which would be a lot harder for me to do even as a professional if I was only using my tuner. Again, you want to go over and use a tuner and a stabilizer, and that's what the general thing is. The tuner is to go either higher, lower, or hit a specific note, which doesn't necessarily have to be higher or lower. One of the reasons I personally use tuner is that there's certain type of ways that you may want to say a word, which we're going to get into a lot later from this audio to not overwhelm new beginners. But to give a quick example, hello, how are you today? Hello, hello, hello. How are you? Hello, how are you? Hello, 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 hello. My tuner is hello right now. Again, as said, hi is my normal tuner. However, I use different words if need be. For this voice, I am specifically trying to hit a AI type of voice. As such, hello, breaking the word into two, which we're going to go into next, is something which I more use as hello as my tuner.
to specifically hit this note, as AI stuff is still really hard for me to give an artificial type of voice. As such, hello is is my tuner. Sorry. And how are you? How are you? Hello, how are you? Is my stabilizer. After all, a stabilizer does not need to be only one word. It can be multiple if that fits your needs more. That's why I wanted to go on this specific voice, because it is quite hard to specifically, well, have definable limits here, which is why we want to expand your point of view.
Hopefully that helps a little bit. Now, to go over on the third thing, because if you don't remember, I did say there was 3 things that you need to learn as the basics. The other one is sentence structure. Now, to go over and give the beginner part of this, and the reason why we're doing it, sentence structure control is basically how we are saying a word. How are we specifically going to be dialectically saying it? I'm probably messing up that word quite a bit, by the way, here, but it just sounds right for me to go over and give the whole professional feel. But if you noticed, when I was doing the AI voice, I said hello, right? Hello. Breaking the word that's generally just one word into 2 smaller ones, hell and low. The reason that I do that is that, one, it can help add to the vibe of a voice, well, hitting the vibe that I want. I want something to sound artificial, and emphasizing the fact that, hey, which we're going to get into emphasization later. I'm kind of jumping a little bit ahead here, but it's all going to wrap together. It's all going to make sense. Don't worry, it does. But hello emphasizes the word easier for both my voice to go over and say it in that type of way, and emphasizes the type of vibe that I want the voice to go to. It's something that's an easy shorthand that you can more, well, utilize pretty easily, both to make the voices easier to say and to give them a distinct feeling. However, you also want to have it so that we have more control and more range on what you can do your voice. After all, if every single character talks the exact same way, well, shit, that isn't actually a different person, is it? The main thing for voice acting is that, well, learning different ways to change the way that you're saying words is basically the equivalent in normal acting as controlling your body language. Luckily for us, this is a lot easier than that type of thing. For basic practice on this type of thing, I suggest 2 words. Hello and hello. To give a quick example on both sides of the, different type of voices we can do for this. Hello, dollface. What are you doing around here? Hello. What are you doing here? Or, in reverse. Hello, doll. What do we have here? Hello. Who came into our little trap? Just from using one starter word, it changes a bit of the vibe of the character, right? Now again, you would be using this for every single word generally, but as a beginner practice tool, the ones that I suggest is again, hello, it should be still up on the screen right now, and hello. We're breaking these words into smaller words to make us that way, one, our brain has an easier time pronouncing them in case the word's a little bit more difficult. Again, one of the big things that you'll be doing in vocal training and everything is both tricking your brain and tricking other people's brains. We'll get into tricking other people's brains in a little bit, but for right now, tricking your own brain is easier in case you're, instead of going over on hello as one full word, using it as hello in the way that's spelled right here, can make it easier, one, to do this type of trick, and two, in case that you're going over and start practicing with this a lot, you can start breaking other words down. For instance, darling. What are you doing, darling? I'm breaking the word down into dar, and then emphasizing the ling. As such, it makes it easier for me to, in that space, add the little growl which you just heard. Again, to re-emphasize it, darling. By having that little break, I can easily add in the little part of my voice that's a little bit more unique, my little fucking growl. This is one of the big ways that we are going to be doing about this way of, well, sentence structure, about how you're saying the word. Because well, when you start doing a lot of different type of voices, or you're doing little switches, which again, we're gonna get to vocal switches in a bit. I'm just teasing the little information in the future, because the video's gonna be very, very long. When we're doing that, it makes it easier to add or subtract things, which we're going to be going into more later on. Again, this is one of the reasons why I consider this as one of the foundational things, along with tuning and stabilizing, to learning voice work. Hopefully, we didn't hold on to this element too long for those who, are more advanced. But even some lovely little voice actors, like the friend I mentioned, didn't quite know this one. And just to go over on that first little bit, one of the things that does help a lot is that by emphasizing your voice in different type of small little parts, we can then, make the voice either more masculine or more feminine. For instance, hello, hello. We're doing more of a draw on the voice, and that can code a little bit more masculinely if we're holding on to our words more in this type of way, right? We're, well, adding a different type of lesson I'll be going into you soon. Or a very long time when we're getting into pacing, but, holding on to words more in this type of way, well, it doesn't quite read as feminine, right? Because we already went over about the ways girls normally talk, and staying straightforward in these type of ways while still having a little bit of a break when we're holding on to words just slightly. Well, that codes more on the masculine dude who's going over and talking about these type of things right now. I'm doing the same type of vocal pattern right here as, I was doing before. The only difference, my voice is now in a more easily accessible feminine way. Again, this works really well in having different characters, kind of code in certain type of ways, which is, pretty important when you're doing voice work. After all, if you want some character to sound like a butch, you're going to need the character to, have some type of vocal patterns which are perhaps a little bit more masculine. Or if you want somebody to sound, like I'm inside the lab quite often, and I wouldn't mind someone like you joining me there. Well, we drag out the words slightly more. We, hold on to words at the end of them. We take little breaks between when we're talking. And by having the little breaks in how we're talking, it's easy to go over and code this voice a little more femininely. Which, again, can very much more help when we're doing voice acting like this, to envision that character as perhaps smaller built, perhaps a little bit more feminine in how they're presented. Again, small little stuff like this is to, after all, trick the brain, as we said earlier. But why don't we start going into the little bit more advanced lessons? Now, this is the first part where we're starting to learn different voice acting stuff. For me, I consider this the first step on our pyramid. The first, things that we just learned are the base. You kind of need to have them to be able to actually do voice acting in a way that's like fully comprehensive of voice acting, at least in my opinion. Other than you just making sounds and stuff. These are the things that basically help you very much do voice acting. Are they necessarily fully required? No. After all, one can go over and learn actual acting without being, aware of your body language and stuff, but having these three basics really much helps. Now, I've given different ways to practice with that in case that you don't have your own. I would suggest that you practice different words, though, for all the things. One, in case that we're doing the little sentence structure thing, you are going to want to practice with other words eventually, but hello, and hello should help you quite a bit. And on the other ones, in case that you don't find your own little tuning words, hi and hello should be good stabilizers and, tuners. At least for me. These are like the good basic starting kick. But eventually you will want to try and branch out and try if different things works better for you, okay? But as a beginner stuff, that should help you out. I've said that a few different times, but I really want to make it sure that, like, in case you say to the beginner stuff, that's what I do. You are not ashamed. There's nothing that you should worry about. But now going over towards the basic lessons, we should go over and start with, vocal switches or vocal changes. We're not going to be quite going over on vocal switches yet. You'll get them into a little bit though. But vocal changes. Now, what are these? When we're talking about a vocal change, in this specific context, when I'm talking to you, is that we're having a voice change from one type of way towards another. To give a very easy example, Foul beast, you shall die today. Do you have any last words? What's happening over there? James. No, 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 don't. Vocal change. We're having the character go from very dominant, very strong, towards something that's like, oh no, fuck. Of course, we can move more of a dramatic change, and I personally would do a more dramatic change, as I'm going to showcase later, but this is an easy one that we can more do, right? By having the voice change in these specific ways, from start to end, well, we can more easily direct what the emotions of the characters are. But, well, lessons from now on are going to have a few multi-layers that we can more utilize. So, when we're talking about vocal changes, there's a few different things we can more do. For instance, when we're having a vocal change go from the first character, we're going to repeat those lines and go a little bit further with it now. For the plot of this, to make it that way it's a little bit easier what I have in my head, there's a great beast, I don't know, make it a werewolf or something, werebeast, whatever. And we, as the speaker, are going to want to kill this beast for the glory, for the prestige. But eventually the beast got out. What are we to do? Well, we're a confident person. We're somebody who's very gung-ho, but in case you haven't noticed from the other voice, I'm emphasizing things. I'm going forward. I'm always talking more like this. And by doing that, well, one, we're going to talk more about that when we're talking about emphasization. But two, it sounds more like false bravo, doesn't it? Again, we'll talk more about that when we're talking about emphasization. But by just having that type of character from just the voice, sounds like something that would crumble under pressure. So, why don't we see what that type of crumbling would be like? Foul beast, you shall die today. I hope you have your last words, for these shall be your last. What? The chains? No. I got these at premium. There shouldn't be any type of issue at all. End them. Now. No. I... Stay back, beast. I am the vicious Count. I shall not falter here. I will not. Stay back. Stay back. I will end you. Here and now. No, fuck. No. Fuck. Dude, what are you gonna do? See? The dramatic type of way that we shifted things is going back and forth. After all, a character normally wouldn't just go immediately down to the other end. That does happen, but in the scenario we built, it doesn't have to be. Hence, we're going back from the more confident type of way of talking towards losing that composure. We're switching back and forth between that voice and the other. This is the basic of vocal switch, which is also a lesson that we'll be going into here. From here, a lot of lessons do blend into each other, but I should go back towards emphasization. I did talk about that more, about giving an impression on a voice. So, what does help with expression towards, that type of character? What matters there on the emphasization? Well, to give an easy way to visualize this, if every word that we are saying is written down, an emphasization is underlining that word. Now, if you have one or two words emphasized, or having an underlining, line under it, I know, I am the best at speaking. Well, you're going to pay more attention to those words, right? That's what our brain does. When we are going over to trick a brain, by going over and focusing on, hello, doctor, what are you doing here today? The doctor, and perhaps even the here and today, are emphasized, but the other words aren't. The best way I can go over and say this, again, it's not a perfect analogy, but the line underneath the words can be both thicker or lighter. For what we're having for the doctor, it's more underlined than here today. That line is still there, but it's a little bit more faded. Again, it catches your attention less. This is what emphasization at its core is. So, when we're writing down everything and every single word is emphasized, does it really hold the same impact? No. That's what the main character we just voiced was. Somebody who's emphasizing every single word. You can hear it more now, can't you, vile beast? I'm taking a pause between every word and going over on every single thing to make sure you hear it. As such, there's the boldest underlying possible that I can have for this voice. But it starts to blur together, right? If everything's underlined, then underlining stuff doesn't have any meaning. That's what gives the impression of false confidence. It's, again, a way that we can easily trick the brain into going like, oh, this person is like kind of self-conscious or not really confident in themselves. Or, in case you want to play it 100% straight, you can have that character later realize like, oh shit, like I'm coming across a bit like an asshole. There are different type of ways that you can, go with vocal stuff here. But the prime example that we're going to be using and the way that's like more easily understood is somebody's projecting, right? Again, that's one of the ways why emphasization can work really well. Because we can give a character impression completely just by overusing the trait. But as I said earlier, every single lesson that we're going through here right now has multiple meanings. So what would be a different way to emphasize things? We just use a, masculine voice. So I'm going to be using a feminine voice for this one. Oh, hello, Doctor. I heard there was a great issue that was occurring. Can you please tell me what great fate has occurred towards our lovely city? Do you mind informing me, Doctor? Why, of course. Oh no, there was a great bomb inside the city? Oh no, that would be terrible. Oh, Doctor, I don't know what's wrong. Oh, I'm already smiling. Oh no. Well, I'm sorry, Doctor. You see, all that was my handiwork, and seeing you so terrified of it is definitely doing me in slightly. Oh, Doctor, you really don't pay attention. I wanted to do it for one reason. The thrill. As one knows, Doctor, the chemicals inside one's brain, well, they're quite unpredictable. We're doing a different form of emphasization there, aren't we? We're still not emphasizing on every word, but by emphasizing on certain words, it certainly gives you the impression that something's a little off with her before I even do the big reveal, right? It adds foreshadowing, because they're not quite reacting the way a character should, right? Hearing that the city's been bombed, going like, oh no. Not emphasizing of a, oh no, where we're underlining the oh no, but more of a, oh no. Again, we're not underlining that at all. As such, it seems like not that big of a reaction. As such, our brain starts going like, wait, what? Huh about that. Wait a little bit. Your conscious may not, but the subconscious does. Again, this is what I more mean by like voice acting is basically fucking with your brain slightly to go over about different type of expectations and subverting them or, well, following through. This is what a great voice actor actually does. We mess with the brain a little bit to make it so that way you have a feeling about something in the back of your mind. The little lizard brain sees something's a little bit wrong before we fully deliver. Now, of course, this is more very visible because I am trying to teach people right now about stuff, but we are going to go to more extreme levels of this later on. But one, emphasization doesn't have to be the exact same. The way that I'm speaking that type of voice is more dragging words over and we're holding stuff for more. Therefore, when the good doctor goes over and, well, I'm starting out on the word. I'm having a harder hit when I'm going for it. Same as our little confident bastard. But, we are taking little pauses still, little ways to hold on, to further deliver the impact. When I say certain words. Same thing again that we were doing with the bastard, except we're not doing it on every word now. As such, it feels more organic, and could even be slightly threatening. Now, emphasization is, again, underlining. We're doing those words to specifically catch out for our audience, which is why you kind of want to do it really well. But Speaking of doing a voice well, we're not quite done with that character, are we? After all, vocal changes we already kind of went into about how changing a voice from one state to another, but we didn't quite finish that arc. Because you see, there's two ways you can end that one. The first one is basically, I know how certain artists which follow me, which I'll probably send this video to, would probably more react from like confident to helpless. I'm sure some people are writing fics at the moment. But there's a third way you can more go with that character, as somebody who makes more safe for work stuff, or you can even add this in case that you are doing non-safe for work art. For that, why don't we go back towards the character? When the character is talking in their normal selves, we're having, vile beast, what are you doing here? When they lose their confidence, no, no, what do you want? The voice is still here, a little bit, but it's shaky. It's not fully here. This is the second state of the voice that we are aiming for, when the person seems more vulnerable and also slightly more feminine. So, what would we be doing to mix these two voices together as a character arc? Yeah, we're going over towards narrative tropes. Again, most ASMR stuff that which you're doing, or different voice acting stuff, is in service of a story, in the same way that art or anything else is. As such, in case we're going to be telling a story through our voice, how can we end that story? The first one is, as I said, to leave that voice completely helpless. No, please, no. Stuff like that. But it doesn't need to be like that, does it? Instead, we can keep adding on to that journey, where perhaps the person is now a little bit more mellowed out after, dealing with that person, going on some adventures, maybe, who knows? Or maybe just, getting fricked a lot, I don't fucking know. So what do we add towards that character to make it a little bit more easy? Hello, friend. What are we doing here? It's a pleasure to see you. Me? I've gone on a grand journey. There were some vicious foes that fell towards my blade. And you, my friend? Me? Engaging in different type of things outside of my match? Never! Totally don't have a history of doing that, oh vile beast. Oh, never. By doing that, we more separate kind of what the voice is. Hopefully you heard it more. I specifically went for the vile beast comment to help kind of show the difference between the voice. One, we're making the voice still sound, well, off-center slightly. But now the off-center is in control, honestly. After all, having a voice that is changing slightly in small little ways like these, well, yeah, it still has confidence. And I'm still emphasizing things, aren't I? My dear, dear friend, I'm still taking small pauses, and now I talk towards you. And we've kept in a little bit more of the emphasization, but now it's not so repentant. And we're having small little breaks, but they actually are in service of something, no longer just there to bluff and bravo. And the voice is still here at the end. After all, I can easily change the voice slightly to be more vulnerable with you. After all, I missed you, my friend. But you can't quite do that with the other voice, which is all bravo and stuck up. We've done more a character arc. The character has a false bravo, ends that false bravo broken, and at the end of the character arc, has confidence but is more relaxed, is less uptight in the way that the person is going, because we're not underlying every single thing, which sounds like the character's either really stuck up or really stressed. This is a character arc that we more do through vocal changes. Now, here's the thing. When you're doing vocal changes by themselves, you don't necessarily need to do it the way I am. What I've been doing has been doing both vocal changes and vocal switches. What that more means is that I am changing the start and end from the voice. But what you can more do is just keep talking in this type of way, and then pause the recording, and then add another. After all, since part of the thing about our type of medium is that we can easily pause a recording and keep going over it. Most of the time, you're not going to notice a difference unless there's background sound or something. This is one trick which is what differentiates vocal changes from vocal switches. Another thing with vocal changes is vocal changes are a lot more directed. You're going from one state to the other. Again, you can do both vocal changes and vocal switches, but that is let's just say I've always been practicing this for like many years. It's the reason why it looks so seamless. It's not normally so seamless for other people which I've taught, which again is totally fine. You don't need to do it the way I do. You can work yourself up to here if that's what you're interested in. But speaking about vocal switches, that's kind of like one, well, we're nearing the end of the middle of the road lessons here. But a vocal switch is switching a voice in the moment. What we can more do here is also by adding in, well, the sentence structure thing, remember? One of the reasons why I brought that up earlier is that we can easily shift the voice in the middle of speaking. For instance, hello, doctor, I'm so happy to see you. Oh, what's wrong? Oh, doctor, you need your meds. There has been no type of change. I am still your faithful servant. You programmed me that way, didn't you? Now come, we have different type of issues to go over about. You see, doctor, there is this type of issue right here, where we kind of need to go into the soul of somebody to go over and dig in very deep. Therefore, doctor, I need you to, well, do your magic. I know, doctor, but it was at the request, and you did pay the premium. We cannot let down our patients. Is that not the case, doctor? Of course. So, let me go over and grab the hooks. And there we go, doctor. I will look after you. There's no need to worry. After all, if anything happened, yeah, there would be an issue. But you know my strength. No one will reach you without my permission. I guarantee it. Of course, doctor. Starting up the boot now. So, doctor, what's wrong? Oh, nothing, doctor. Tell me, with this little link in place, what are you seeing? I will say, I have learned quite a bit by looking, well, right beside you, as your faithful servant. Normally, I wouldn't be able to make something as great as this. Well, the personality kind of got overwritten, memories didn't. Oh, doctor, there's no need to worry. See? Vocal switch. I more keep going over from the higher one to small little switches to make it a little bit noticeable that something's a little bit off. It does also add into the fact that, like, my last doctor one was also an evil bitch. But by having the small vocal switch in between the word and then switching back towards the other thing, it's something that your ear catches, but you're like, and it's understandable why the character doesn't fully focus on it. But by going over about the, doctor, or doctor, doc, we're going over on the stem one, duh, we drop. As such, we keep dropping for the rest of the voice. Well, the voice lines. As such, you know, you can kind of easily slot that in without having to find a new word or anything else. It's, again, a way that we are tricking our own brain into making voice acting easier for us. Again, this is more of a higher tier skill, but if you can do it, hey, props to you, dude. Or do that. Or whatever fucking threat is in between. Now, this is what we are ending on the mid-level lessons. Emphasization, which was us more focusing on a word. We're going to be more bringing out the whole thing about it, underlining the word. Vocal switches, which is what we just did, going over about different changes, going over in a voice, and changing it directly in the middle of speaking. As such, we can have different type of vocals done over, very much radically change a character by having these different type of changes. This can work very well for different type of characters in case that we want to go over and have a flip in their personality. Or maybe they're forcefully flipped. After all, this works really well for also having a character that suddenly gets injected with something, right? Again, I'll let your storyteller brains go all the way out with this one. And vocal changes. Directed changes which we plan out in advance by practicing our voice. We find different type of ways that we want the character to more speak to have different endpoints in their character. And we connect them together. Generally, this is done on the purpose of doing character storytelling, but it can also more work in the moment just to go over and further emphasize something. After all, in case that we want to emphasize something for them to hit even harder, we don't necessarily even need to go over and just, well, say it in a certain way. if I say a word in a different way than I say every other word, that would still stick out in your ears. It would still sound like it's underlined, right? I'm still staying towards the basics here for things to be a little bit more easier, because I don't know how many people are going to be listening towards this. But if I start talking more in this type of way, and I suddenly switch to this, and keep talking normally in the other way, your brain's going to catch that, right? You're going to focus more on the vocal switch. It's like, what the fuck? Right? Again, that's another way you can emphasize things. There is more ways to do each one of these lessons. I am staying towards the basics, though, because I don't have 7 hours, man. This video is already going to be long as fuck. But that's the start of vocal changes. And, again, as long as you practice in advance, you can go over and do different acts and record them separately and just add them up together. In case, again, you want a character to have perhaps a low moment, which some people may want them to stay in, you fucking degens, and the other times you may want to raise that character back up. Or, and if you're doing that, you will either A, want to kind of take into account in case you're doing it really well, or you are able to do so, switch the character back and talk in a slightly different way. As such, as a way to show progression in the character. Again, you don't need to do this, but I heavily suggest that you do. It's, in most cases, the better option. Unless you're doing a time loop type thing, which, like, yeah, if you're doing time loops or other things with the character resets, you're going to go back to the other voice, obviously. Unless you want to foreshadow things. Again, voice acting's hard because there's so many different type of ways for it. Which is why I'm going to be giving just general tips and directions which you can go with stuff without necessarily knocking anything down. Okay? Okay. So, next we get towards the higher difficulty lessons. What I more gave you was the bottom of the pyramid, the middle layer. This is the basically upper layer of difficulty. What we are going to be practicing right now is, well, remember how I said earlier that vocal changes generally have more of a direction, where we're kind of changing the character to one way or another? This is kind of the step up from that, where we're going to be having a character talk in different ways, in basically a type of way, as we were saying before, code switching. This can mean lots of different things. For me, I'm going to be voicing, think of him as a mob boss or something. So then we're going to be changing how we talk in 2 different ways, in ways to further give a more grounded character. Oh, hello, researcher. I heard there was a great type discovery that somebody made. So, little researcher, mind telling me what happened? What great research. You just had to go over and tell it to the rest of the world. Really? You're not going to tell little old me? My. So selfish, aren't you? And here I was going to go over and give you a ground. Yes. Oh my god, little researcher. You know, you keep going over and digging your head into everything because everything must be unearthed and learned from, right? Of course. Certainly hasn't gotten you any trouble. But, in case that is really what you want, I was going to go over and give you a grant. Yes, any research should be done which includes those which other people may not necessarily find appealing. Right? So, I was looking into things, and I haven't seen there be much or research done on our waste disposals. So, I was going over, and I was thinking of making a grant for it. And don't worry about any permission or how much it would cost me. I own the place. I have all my men on the other end. I can go over and show you every step of the process right beside you during every single moment, along with some of my people. I'm sure that you would love to go over and give them a little bit of information, right? And also, don't worry in case you mess anything up. Everything there stays for a few days before going into, more professional areas. And we can go over and look at every step of the process, and don't worry, about any bureaucratic red tape or anything. None of them are going to look. After all, it's my factory, it's my private property, and as long as it doesn't enter the public area, they have no reason to look. So, in case you're really interested in having your other type of research, I must insist that we go over and get you towards my type of area, so we can go over and get some good research done. After all, everything must be researched and looked into, right? Oh,
What's wrong? I thought that you said everything had to. Weren't you agreeing before? What could possibly be the issue? And looking deeper into that, are you looking down on those who do waste disposal? Really? I didn't think you were the type, researcher. But if you're not going to look into everything, I could just rescind the grant. I'm keeping it there specifically for you in case you ever need it. And, because I trust your research, doctor. Or researcher. Well, if nothing comes up, you could have to do it on a different day. I kid. But the offer's still open in case you ever want to pursue more research into these subjects that just need to be learned about, right? Of course. Anyway, I just wanted to go up and talk towards you about this type of grant. With all the other type of words I've been hearing bad from you, if there's nothing that you're going to be looking into, then I don't need to worry. I can keep my money inside the grant. Anyway, I'll go shut that down. Sorry for keeping you for so long. Men, let them go. Of course. I'm sure that they've had a radical change in expression, and now knowing that not everything needs to be looked into, by their own words, of course. So I'm sure everything will work out fine. Right, researcher? By that, we are switching between different ways for the character. We're switching between the first one, which is them more talking in this type of way, going over more threatening and talking directly towards you. More mocking, more going over with the best good faith intentions on these other type of things. Which, for those who didn't pick up on it, because, hey, certain people may have certain disorders that don't catch the other nuances there, they're going to a waste disposal in a place where, it's directly confirmed that, oh yeah, nobody's going to see you. All the people there are mine. I own the factory. I own everything there. And if I take you there and something happens towards you, which I can do at any point in time because I have you right here, nobody's going to look into it. It's a direct threat, which is done in a way that can't exactly be recorded and is more talked about directly. As such, the character is being falsely sweet. Hence the different change in the voice going more like this, and holding on to words more, sounding more fake, and how we're having the other voice before, talking like this. Confident smirk, seemingly coming over. And this one's just so considerate, so there for you, and here to go over and help you, because you really need to look into everything, which would include this, right? Still, talking in a different type of way, which wouldn't come off as too threatening towards anyone who doesn't have the context. Again, good character work that we're doing there by making it side with the character, in case there was a videotape there or, a wire. It doesn't necessarily sound like it's that threatening, something that you couldn't probably hold up in court, especially if the court's like kind of corrupted. But it's still there validly as a threat, and we're having more of a switch. The two sides of the character, the false side of them and the real side. But we're not changing the character. We're not changing the way that they're kind of going over in the same way that we're doing the a voice change. We're having the character still be the exact same, and we're switching stuff, sure, but we're having two distinct modes. The first mode is the character talking fully in the control area, fully straightforward, here to kill you. And the second one's a little bit more mocking to go over, as I know that you will hear every word I say, and you will not be able to deny anything. We're having two different character modes, which we can switch towards. Two pre-built models that we can go over and switch towards whenever we, need to, for what we want the character to be. This requires active vocal switching, unlike the other one, and we need to be able to be consistent in our vocal switch. When we're doing a normal vocal switch, we don't need to be necessarily, in the same type of finely defined rules. We're just changing our voice to be one way or another, to go over and do a dramatic reveal or something else. This one, we're staying in certain consistent lines. The character is always talking in the exact same way in one and the other, and we're just switching between that. Hence why it's a more high-tier thing, because you need to stay consistent on this, which can be quite hard. Our second lesson, that is on the higher tier, is, kind of going in towards that. As we were going over, there's a contrast in how the person is talking versus what they're actually saying, right?
Now, there are different levels that you can more take this towards, which is what we are going to be talking about next as the third final lesson. There's like two more I have with. One more still in this tier and one more that's like after this, which is like the core of voice work in my opinion. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. So, from what we just talked about, there is a contrast, right? We are going over and making it that way. What our guy character, the Morphew Bush, was saying was something that was pretty threatening when you start actually reading into it, but we kind of hide that a little bit by making it seem more nice and kind. People which are more perceptive are going to notice the contrast and go like, oh, that's a little bit more scary, right? That's the purpose of doing that type of contrast. One, it does more character work, but we'll get into that a little bit more with our next example, because as I said, I am going to be doing female and male examples for most of these. But just by going over on the male example we have so far, that character, well, it kind of adds to their vibe, right? By having that contrast between, the nice side when they're being super threatening. You get kind of more of a vibe of what that character is actually like. This is one important part of contrast, actually. It can help you very much set up, like, hey, this is the character in these type of scenarios, and this is how they're different than what you'd expect them to be, or expect them, without knowing narrative tropes, what they would be saying. After all, without knowing narrative tropes or anything else, we'd expect the person just to straight up threaten the person. By them not doing that, it tells us a bit more about their character. This is one of the good parts about contrast, in my opinion, and one reason why I also like adding it into vocal change. It's a more thought out reason of doing it, because there are more ways you can do this. The reason I have contrast as a higher level than vocal change is that it requires more of a mental control to be able to do it. Again, most of the vocal stuff that we're talking about so far has been mental stuff, things you have to be aware of, and then consciously try and control. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, though, before we get to the final lesson. But, without me going over on a tangent, the contrast helps a lot to solidify a character. It also very much helps us be able to identify different parts about them, and it also can help freak out our audience. To go over and give a more, severe example of contrast, I'm going to be using my female voice to go over and talk about somebody who had a break-in and is now talking towards their wife, because I'm gay. I'm feeling more comfortable doing that. Okay, let's get started. Hey, hey, baby. Hi. Oh, yeah. How was your day? Uh, yeah. Well, you see, okay. So first off, I'm sorry, but you are gonna have to keep the stuff in the limousine. Like, I can pay for that. Don't worry. But I'll probably have to route you some money. I think I can do that. Cause like our place is kind of swarmed by the cops, which means that you won't be able to get all your precious little toys inside your. Oh, oh, baby, it's no worry. We're... All right. So there was a break-in. Yeah, it's annoying. Oh, don't. If it was just that, the cops would have already left. I was there. Baby, you don't need to worry. After all, they're the ones who got more trouble than it was worth. Oh. Officer, you're not even gonna let me be cool in front of my wife? Fine, yes. I'll keep talking towards her at the end, and then you can take the line and you can get me more questioning, yes. Anyway, as I was going to say to them in a little while, they broke in. And, I am the absolute connoisseur with all the money I have to go over and, spoil you. So, since I knew there could always be somebody who would try something on somebody as precious as you, doll, I did up the security a little. Yeah. But, Ted and them wanted to take a day off, which I was fine with. So, in case there was any days that they wanted to take off or they were being lazy, I did install some home security things. Mm-hmm.
Simple stuff like, the little drop box that was like so popular back then, baby. I remember that somebody was so enthused by it. Yeah, yeah. The little shotgun thing on the bed. I grabbed that and just installed it in our walls a little bit. And, when certain people broke in and were trying to be all tough and stuff, I guess. All it took was just a little bang, and boom, no issue at all. Mm-hmm. After they were dealt with, I had to go over and call them because I know that it's more suspected and stuff. And also, you were being busy. I didn't want to bother you, baby. Yeah, yeah. Finally having a day out. I could never want to ruin that for you, baby. Fine, fine, fine. I'll tell you next time if there is one. Fine, fine. Okay, officer, just a little bit more time. Oh, baby, you don't need to worry. Yeah, so, they can try to hold something to me, I guess. They can try. But they did break into my home. They did take care of my security. They hacked into some of the stuff. Bit surprised that I'm gonna be checking in on some people in a little bit, because, oh, what would happen if you were home? But, you know, um, I had valid reasons to assume that they would be a fit to my life, so I just stood my ground. And even if I used unreasonable lethal force, there was no way to prove that. I was feeling very threatened for my life. And, I had to convince these officers to finally let me call you. I am so traumatized. And they wouldn't even let me call my wife. You know how rude that is? My God, right? Yeah. Oh, don't worry, baby. Hearing your voice is already healing me right up. Besides, as you would know, my little doll, I have enough money. They don't have anything on me. Or anything substantial that would hold up. Mm-hmm. Oh, just spend a bit of money and then it will take care of itself, so don't you worry. I will start giving you some plans on people to contact, though. So that way you can have your own little place. They're gonna complain about it, but, if I just give them some money, it should take care of it. Anyway, they're giving me glares for a while. So rude. So I gotta go. I love you, baby. Did you notice something about that voice? We're already doing, contrast. If you have an idea, hey, maybe write it down below. Maybe, but I don't know. But here's the main idea for contrast in the character. One, they were pretty unemotive, weren't they? Most of the time. They were thinking, they were going over about stuff, but they weren't really that afraid and talking about maybe people breaking into their house. They weren't that afraid talking about the legal consequences. They were pretty unemotive about other type of issues, like, oh yeah, I have to pay money for that, I guess. Like, they were pretty unemotive on most of the things, excluding one thing. But that's contrast. Things that would normally be more terrifying, things that would be normally more, stressful for the characters, we don't really have here with this character. The character is just taking on laissez-faire and seems to have, well, an inability to care about it. As you develop this character further, in case you wanted to use a character like that, you could either make it that way, like, they literally physically can't care about stuff like this, hence, mental disorder or something else like that. Or they've gone through a lot of different scenarios that are stressful like this before, hence, they don't give a fuck. I don't know, we can basically write them as like, I seem like a really strong businesswoman, but really I was just a mercenary that got paid a lot in dues and interest, and I made that type of cover to make it seem like a businesswoman towards normal people. Again, we can flip that either way in case you want to. But the main crux of that contrast, they don't care about the police. They don't care about them being inside the office. They don't care about their life was possibly threatened. They don't care that much about anything happening to them. But they cared a lot about you, didn't they? They picked up more. They're going over and asking about your day. They're asking about different type of issues that are going over about their type of, you know,
they're not worried about the consequences that are happening towards them, but they are worried and making plans to make sure that your limousine full of items is able to be properly stored for a little while and that you have a safe place to be. They only get seemingly angry about the break-in or the threats that the break-in had because what if you were home? That's the only time they show any anger or anything. And they seem to be more smug, talking towards you about there being no issues, but when they're not directly talking towards you, that kind of falls away. You are the emotional center. And we can do that and set that up without explicitly saying it by contrast. They only emote when they're talking about you directly. This is one of the fun parts about contrast. Again, remember what we said? Contrast works really well to inform us about what the character, well, is feeling or cares about. After all, but what they emote about and what they don't emote about that we would assume they should emote about, well, that tells us a lot about their character. This is more of an extreme example. I could also make this a lot more extreme, but this video has been going on for a while, and I don't want to keep this section going over for an extra 15 minutes. So with that out of the way, hopefully this gives you a better idea about contrast. How we can make us that way the character is telling us a lot by how they are or are not reacting to things. The contrast of how the character should act in a situation versus how they are acting. This is one of the benefits that also adds in towards everything else that we've been talking about. As I said earlier, a lot of the lessons that we're talking about right now do fold into the other ones. We can make this an easier thing by being easy contrast. Can add in towards emphasization. After all, if a character doesn't seem to be reacting towards something, if we don't have something underlined which should be underlined, well shit, that tells us something, right? But contrast is more, one, things kind of do vaguely fit together inside of here, but contrast basically helps us set a narrative for a character. Emphasization can help us be a tool to set off that narrative, but it's not necessarily always going to be used like that. It's, again, each one of these things are tools. They're kind of mixed together a little bit, which is why it's harder to go about this. But one reason I do have this as contrast above emphasization or vocal changes, which could fit inside of these things too, is that for contrasts, in the same vein as the last one where we had different vocal modes that we were switching between, takes more of a conscious effort. It's something that you have to be a lot more aware of, and that you have to be a lot more conscious of whenever you're doing voice acting. I myself am fine to do this more freestyle and stuff because I've been doing voice acting for a very, very, very long time before I officially started doing it on my channels. But this is something that you really need to think about and plan in advance before you do it. Hence why it's on a higher level. While emphasization is something that you can do on the spot, kind of, in case you have a certain idea. It's easier to fit into something and can be used on a lesser level than what we're going to necessarily have to use for do good contrast. I just wanted to explain a little bit why there's kind of intersections around most of these things, but there are different levels towards it. I just consider these things to be more difficult to do. Sorry, I'm a little bit sick recording today, so that's why there's some little vocal flips a little bit. Hopefully you can understand. But my voice isn't bad enough that we can go over and talk about the final lesson before we reach the top of the pyramid. The thing that, from my view, kind of makes the center of voice work. But before we get there, the last lesson that one should be conscious of whenever they're doing vocal work is timing. Now, this one's easy to more think of, at least a little bit, right? As soon as I say timing, you can kind of assume certain ways, which it could mean, but, well, what exactly do I mean? Have you perhaps noticed I'm already doing it a little bit? I'm taking little pauses between what I'm saying to further emphasize things. I'm having, little moments to go over and stop and talk, and ways I can more easily shift my voice because I have little pauses in between them. Things I can more further emphasize how I'm talking. And that makes it so it's easier for me to do vocal switches. But by having these type of small gaps in timing, it doesn't necessarily feel like, I'm doing something wrong with my voice, am I? Because, a lot of us take little pauses and stuff, but it can help it feel a bit more threatening, or somebody's thinking about something, or, wait, shit, that thing over there, yeah, of course, duh, God, I'm so stupid. We're changing our timing there to hit certain beats. hence further emphasizing what we're saying. Timing is, at its core, controlling the pace of when you're saying things. This is one part which is, the reason this is like the second last example, because this is like the hardest thing in my opinion to be conscious of. This is something that like I've had to manually learn due to my condition, but being aware that you can manually control your timing to have greater effect on things, either A, in slowing down your timing to give yourself little pauses, that way you can more consider something. It makes it also a lot easier to do lots of the vocal change that we've talked about so far, such as emphasization. Having little pauses can help you reset your brain to do little contrast stuff that we just talked about. It can also more help you in, changing your mind to go towards a different type of vocal switch, in the sense of like switching towards a certain type of voice or something else. Having little pauses like that can really help you, in case you're starting out, do a lot more of the changes. However, timing isn't only about holding back more. It's one thing that can really help out a lot to build up suspense and then go over about like, hey, oh, I heard there's an issue on the right wing. Maybe you want to go over and check out the right wing of the school? There could be a big monster over there. Or, making that more dramatic. I'm thinking a little bit lighter on my voice right now. But small little pauses like that in case we make it more dramatic. Hey, you need to go over there. On the right wing, there's a monster over there, and you need to go take care of it. Please. We're doing similar type of timing between both modes, but it makes it a lot easier with that first set of timings to change it a little bit, to be more dramatic, to be a lot more threatening, to further emphasize things. By having that in mind, it makes it easier to set up the scenes that we want to. This is one of the big parts about timing, and one of the reasons why I find timing to be the second most important lesson, and the hardest to really go over, because I have a difficult time explaining it to words because timing is like basically so fucking flexible. You can have timing in the sense of like calming down how you're saying something. In case that you're talking slower, you're slowing down the timing, and that can be both threatening or comforting. After all, don't worry, baby. There's nothing that can hurt you here. So please, calm your heart. Listen to my voice. I'm right here. Nothing can get to you without my permission, my little doll. Okay? But if we change the voice a little bit to on that same level of timing, oh, baby, don't worry. No one can hear you scream, no matter how high that you go. Nobody will hear you, not unless I want them to. Oh, baby, feel free to let out that little bit of torment. Okay. We're using the same beats, but we're changing a few things to make us that way in case if it's better as threatening or calming. Or horny. Some of you will probably find both fucking combinations fucking horny. But that's one of the big things about timing. It's a flexible tool that you can use to further emphasize things, and it's more flexible. Unlike contrast, it's just a fucking tool that you should probably use by default, but it's hard to get a perfect grasp over. You'll have an idea about it, but getting the perfect idea of what timing you should be doing is something that you're just going to have to get more of an individual feel for. This is something which I can quite literally only tell you about without giving you specific type of instructions other than just the two examples I've given you. I can't personally tell you how to do timing for whatever audio that you're doing unless I heard whatever audio that you are making or whatever type of voice that you are trying to do. Hence why it's the last lesson. With the rest of the tools that I've given you, hopefully you have a better idea in your own work where this would best fit. Again, most of the things I've been talking about for, well, over an hour and 10 minutes now have been stuff just to open up your mind about, hey, this is different stuff that you can do with your voice. Here are different ways that you can kind of more practice it. And this one's more of a mental thing. Unlike the other type of ones, I can't give an exact example of, here's like a right way to do timing. There is no one. Unlike most of the other ones where there is, at least some examples I can tell you about how to do contrast well, I can't tell you how to do timing perfectly well because it depends on what type of character you're doing perfectly on that moment. There's no set defined examples I can give you, but hopefully the two examples I did give about, hey, having it more as a mold that you can more use in certain ways, and then the rest of your voice work basically adds in to either emphasize, not in the way that we've been talking about so far, but in the general way. It more helps elevate your work. And, well, it does that by emphasizing what the best parts could be, by using timing as a supplementary material. This is one of the things which, again, there's a reason this is like the second last lesson, as I said before. It's the hardest one I can basically go over and give you. Because this one I can't give you an individual lesson for. I can't tell you how to do it right. Or exactly how to do it wrong. I can only tell you what's right or wrong depending on, well, whatever you're doing on your project. And I hope that with the rest of the tools that I've given you up till now, you can figure out how to slot timing or timing practice into, well, your own work. Now, I know that this last lesson feels a little bit more lackluster, right? But there is one last thing to go over about. As I said, using the pyramid metaphor before, this is the top of the pyramid. This is what everything was working towards. And it's, in my opinion, personally, the core of voice work. Before we get there, though, there is one more thing I should tell you about my own personal philosophy when I talk about voices. After all, everything that we've talked about so far adds into the final thing. So, in case that everything up till now feels a little bit overwhelming, I just want to remind you of something I said at the start of the audio, which, hey, since it's an hour ago, you may have forgotten. I myself, well, talking to you right now, everything I'm doing is manual. As I stated at the start of this, I have a condition that makes it so that way I don't naturally emote. In case I was trying to show happiness, sadness, anything that I've shown you about, like, keeping my voice, well, having emotions and different type of things about it, even stuff like the timing, which I've talked about, I can't naturally do that. I had to physically train to go over and, one, identify all the things which I've told you about before, and then break those parts off individually to learn them. One amazing part about, our voices is that we're kind of naturally, whenever I'm just talking to you right now, doing like 13 different things. In case that it feels a little overwhelming about what we've been doing so far, your voice naturally is doing a lot of stuff. um, and one way to go over and easily think about it to make it feel less stressful, when I was learning about these type of things and having to manually learn how to do each one of these things to not sound like I wanted to punch somebody in the face all the time, because apparently when you can't emote and when you sound, monotone all the time, people assume that you're pissed, even when you're not. Is to break these down into layers. Each thing that I've told you is a layer that we're adding on. One way to think about this is a song. A song normally has instruments, the voice, and different areas the little instruments are going to be on. When we're using our voice, we are having multiple different layers that we're going over and doing at the same time. The big part is that what we are doing when we're doing voice acting in the type of way that, well, I just taught you, each individual section is just one layer, and you can master that layer individually from everything else. You can learn how to do little, sentence structure stuff without having to, learn about how to do emphasization as much. You don't have to do this at the same time, or how to do contrast. You can do each one of these individual lessons that I've told you so far individually. Again, I suggest that you start with stuff like sentence structure to begin with, as that's one of the fundamentals. But outside of that, hey, you can work on this pyramid at any point in time that you want to, and whatever order. I just suggest that you start at the basics. With that out of the way, and hopefully making people feel a little bit less overwhelmed because this is a pretty long audio, I will talk about what I believe is the core of voice work. Now, this is a personal belief, but hey, since I'm making this video, I want to go over and talk about it since, the main thing about this video is to try and open up your fucking third eye when you're talking about fucking voice work. To make it so that way you're, well, have more insight about how different voice work stuff works and how to control it. And about, hey, there's different ways you can do different voice stuff. And the reasons why I was so agreeable towards adding in how to do the, different mass-presenting voices and female-presenting voices. Outside the fact that, fucking trans. I also wanted to add that in because most people don't fucking know that's a thing. And by being aware about it, it should hopefully help you be a little bit more creative in whatever works that you're doing. Whether it be doing, as I've been mostly preparing this for, voice acting in the sense of like, actual voice acting, or, doing your own personal projects or ASMRs, like what I myself do. The next piece of advice, though, is a lot more targeted. What I'm going to be talking about next is something that's a lot more applicable or understandable in case that you are making your own projects, or in case that you are, well, hey, just doing voice work because you like doing fucking voice work, okay? Well, that's the reason why I started doing it. And that gets me to stop stalling. What the final lesson is pattern forming and pattern breaking. Now, some of you, through the rest of the parts of the lesson so far, may already have a grasp of what that is. But for those who don't completely understand it, well, I'm going to be digging into my own personal work this time to give an example. One way that pattern forming really works well is that whatever voice that you're doing, whatever your own individual voice is, whatever voice you've chosen for a character, eventually they're going to get used to it. To give a very radical example, for one of my characters, this one, I more used always whenever the person was talking as like an individual quirk for this character, that they would not say human, they would say human, 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 human. Always a hue to add to the men. Now, in the short period of time which I just showed it towards you, that probably feels off, right? But inside the audio, I kept doing that for around 50 minutes. Add up altogether all the individual parts which I did for that. As such, even in case they're only doing it for 5 minutes, though, it would become more normalized. After all, remember what I said about tricking the brain? In case that you set up a pattern, the brain is going to recognize it and is going to change a little bit to start seeing it as more normal. Even in case I was only doing human for like 5 minutes talking towards you in a voice like this, you would understand and you would get it. And, well, this individual pattern does certain things, right, human? In case I'm talking in an inhuman way, and by what you can tell in the little thing here, this character isn't human themselves. Hence, maybe a little bit of a silly way they're talking. And also, it makes it more silly. The main point when I'm talking like this human is that I can add individual lines and ways to over exaggerate things when I'm talking human to make it so the voice easily sounds more silly without me doing too much work. After all, by just going over and being pretty light on my voice right now, that voice sounds pretty different to me just talking normally. Because the pattern makes the character seem more silly, but still not dumb or stupid, right? Just silly. The main reason that I bring up that pattern is, well, one, you can make something that seems really silly, something really out there, seem normal in case you spend enough time on it. As again, we trick the brain towards accepting that as a new normal. It's one of the things that our brain actually does in the background in case that you want to be aware of it. Your brain is actually going to get used towards new stimuli after a certain period of time. As such, in case that you have a unique voice or something else that you don't think would actually fit for voice work, I won't lie, the first steps are going to be pretty hard, but in case that I can make a voice that sounds like human, 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 sound decent, and that a lot of people actually liked, I think you'd have an easy enough time eventually finding your audience. I won't guarantee anything, though. But just for anyone who has slight vocal anxiety, I understand that I used to have that too. But there's a second reason. And the reason I specifically say pattern. As you may have noticed, I kept doing different versions of saying human. And they weren't exactly the same, right? Human, 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 human. There are all slight differences in how the person goes. And this is the reason I use pattern. They're not a set standard way that I'm talking. There's just general ways that I'm more doing it. The hue always goes on for a little bit longer than it should. And we always change up the sentence structure to be human instead of human. In case I suddenly started talking in that voice and said, human, human, That sounds really off, right? After all, human is having still longer you added onto it. But suddenly changing that towards being human, what's wrong? I heard there's a human. That really sets you off, right? After all, we did something a lot different than the pattern. Always having the you longer, that isn't the case there. Making it that way, the other thing, is broken into two words, human, isn't really distinct there, is it? This is what I did on my own audio, which is this part, which, to be fucking fair, because I'm going to be sending this towards one fucking friend, was made because of two lovely fucking dames. It's the only reason why this content is, like, female for anyone. It's, like, the only female for anyone content, because it's on two lovely days. So in case you want to watch it as, like, I don't know, something that you want to learn from or something, feel free to. I'll put a link in the description about it, and on that episode specifically. But outside of the shameless self-promotion, we break the pattern. And by breaking that pattern, it's going to have a larger impact. As I said earlier, I was talking in that voice for a pretty long time, adding up all the parts together until I eventually broke that pattern inside one part of the audio is around 50 minutes. 50 minutes in total that somebody would be getting used towards me talking in that specific way with that character, and suddenly I break it? Well, shit. That's gonna hit somebody like a truck. Now, of course, you don't need to go over and make like 50 long minutes audios or something. Again, as I said earlier, 5 minutes or 10 minutes or even a small period like that is enough for the brain to readjust towards a certain way of speaking. The easiest way to think about this is, well, set up and payoff. Even if you're having a character go over and set something up for over 13 bucks, and then you get the eventual payoff, sure, that's probably going to be pretty sweet, but you don't need to set something up for 13 books to get, like, an actual payoff, right? You can set that up in less than a paragraph or two. It doesn't need to be that long to set in a pattern and then, well, break it. And it doesn't need to be in that exact type of way. Remember a lot of things that we've talked about so far? Do you remember Big Bastard? Well, that character was set up and payoff. We were having the character always emphasize every single word they're saying over towards you, vile beast. And we break that pattern. As such, there's more of a euphoria from, oh yeah, this dude, like, lost it, okay. And that's in, like, what, 2 to 3 minutes? Or maybe we're going to talk about timing. If we suddenly have a character talking always like this a little bit more, and just going over and talking towards you, my lovely friend, there's no need to worry, I got everything in control. You need to be quiet. There's something big over there, so quiet, okay? Set up and payoff. We're making so that way the character is going over and talking in a normal type of way, maybe a little bit faster, and then suddenly shifting that towards the character talking a lot slower. Again, set up, payoff. This is one of the main parts about pattern forming and pattern breaking that I think is the part which not people, well, don't talk about voice work. It's the core part. Setting up a pattern and normalizing something, and in case you ever want for dramatic effect, or in case you want to make something hit a lot harder, all you have to do is break that pattern. All things which I've done so far, timing, changing the voice from going from human to human, isn't difficult, right? All I'm doing is just making a pattern, staying consistent towards it, and it can be a simple pattern too, and then breaking it. And it can have a lot larger effect on your audience. This is one reason why, it's the last lesson. Every single thing which I've told you, from timing, from contrast, to emphasization, to sentence structure, to everything, can be used to form a pattern. Something which makes your character more unique. After all, me having just a single individual quirk of going over about human and talking like from that point of view when I'm talking to you, human, makes this character a lot more distinct, I guess, than in case I didn't have that little quirk. And make a pattern individually for this character because, well, there's an individual quirk there. I've made a pattern so that way that character feels, well, more like an actual person. After all, we all have individual quirks, right? All I've done is add one individual quirk towards that character, and as soon as you heard somebody going over and saying, human, a lot of people in my audience would be able to know what character I'm referencing. It makes the voice a lot more distinct because we've added a pattern towards the voice. It also should help some people which have a little bit more anxiety about your own voice, that people are going to get used to it. Don't worry. As long as somebody is interested in your voice, or whatever idea that you projected onto it, you will be okay. I can't promise too much, because, like, you can probably already tell from just me being sick, my vocal work has gone down a little bit. But some people are still going to listen towards what you make. But outside of the safety shit, adding in patterns can make it so that your characters feel more distinct, feel more like themselves as an individual person instead of you acting out a script. It's one of the main things why I keep pointing towards voice acting. There's a difference between somebody who's going over and, doing the basics and going over and working in certain type of scripts, like, The Room, as a pretty good example, and actually acting as somebody who's different than you. And to make it an easy shorthand, all you have to do is practice when you're talking for a little bit before you actually record an individual quirk or tick that the person has. Voice work that for like 10 to 15 minutes, and your brain's going to set into that pattern whenever you're speaking. You don't need to be conscious of it, you don't need to go anything else. And even in case that you're doing script work, well, your own voice is going to be pretty distinct because of those patterns that you built into how your individual version of that character talks. And we can have more of an impact on different type of people by building up patterns just to break them. After all, having the person that's always emphasizing everything you say and then not being able to do so, well, shit, that's going to have a lot more of a drop on the person going from confident to pathetic, right? And that can help emphasize that part of that character work by just us making one a pattern and making it so way that hits harder. This is the reason why I keep going back towards, like, this is the core of voice work, in my opinion. It's what differentiates voice work from everything else, and one of the main reasons why, outside of people just having naturally different voices, different takes on the characters can be so wildly different, as people come up with different patterns in how somebody would say something. For instance, hello, how are you today?
Hello, how are you today?
All I'm doing for different type of patterns is one character more talking in a different type of more normal way, versus somebody who's
always ending their sentences upwards.
And that doesn't change that much, script-wise. But it gives you a different feel for what those characters would be doing. The first one's more casual. Hey, how you doing? Versus,
hey, how you doing?
Same script, different patterns. Again, that's one part which I'm like a vocal nerd for. It's for these different patterns and stuff that you can recognize. Also, little fun fact in case you ever want to get really deep into patterns, and I think that's a really cool like party trick. There are certain patterns that people will have on how they talk in case they're happy or sad. And, you can probably, in case that you've gotten into this enough, just from over the phone, be able to hear when somebody's smiling. And be able to say, oh yeah, nice smile. It's just nowhere. And that freaks some friends out, because I've done that. I've been accused of being a psychic so many times due to it. So hey, in case that you're just doing this to learn to have like a fun little party trick, or a fun little trick that you can play on your friends, there's an extra motivation for it. Anyway, I have been talking for over an hour and a half over 2 days, and I have been recording this last part while I am sick. So, hopefully this is good enough as a, kind of beginner guide on voice acting. I know this still feels like a lot for like a beginner thing, but as said, I am more self-taught. There are different terms and stuff for these type of things. But hopefully this is a good type of guide which you can look towards to open up your mind about how to do different type of voice work stuff, how to categorize certain things, and hopefully it's helpful. It's the main reason I made this, after all. Anyway, I will finally be going because my throat does not like me right now for trying to force this recording through when I'm sick. But I wanted to finish this up before I go over and do some more dental stuff. So hopefully it's fucking fine, and hopefully it's helpful. Anyway, I gotta finally fucking go. So, bye-bye.